Thank you and welcome to today's Candidate Forum, brought to you in partnership with the League of Women Voters of Deschutes County and City Club of Central Oregon, two organizations that are passionately nonpartisan and whose purpose today is to engage and inform Oregon voters for the general election. Today, we are hosting candidates for Bend City Council, seats 2 and 4. Councilors serve a 4-year term. Seat 2 candidates are Anthony Broadman and August Paul Johnson. Mr. Johnson sends his regrets that he will be unable to attend today's forum. Position seat 4 candidates are Rita Schenkelberg, Michael Hughes, and Anon or Buba Walters. Anon Buba has not shown up yet. We're hoping that he will be able to attend, but I'm afraid we need to go because we have time concerns. My name is Kim Scott, and I am past president of the League of Women Voters of Deschutes County, and I am honored to serve as moderator today. We'd like to thank the City Club's annual sponsors and the League of Women Voters Deschutes County members. Without their support, we would not be able to bring you today's program. Today's live stream is also made possible by Connect Central Oregon, a nonprofit launched with the assistance of the OSU Cascades Innovation Co-Lab. Our sponsors for the entire series of candidate forums are the Deschutes Public Library and Buchanan Schmid LLC, and we are grateful for their support. Our candidate forums are conducted according to League of Women Voters guidelines. All candidates who have filed in their race are invited to participate. In the interest of fairness, we do not let an RSVP ever cancel a forum. We thank the candidates for participating today, and we appreciate the gravity of committing to run for office. Our goal is to provide an opportunity for fair and civil discourse. We will start with opening statements. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for their opening remarks, and for each question, each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer. At the end, each will be given a 2-minute closing statement. Questions are from the League of Women Voters, City Club, and those submitted from the community. For opening statements, we have randomly selected the order. The order of who answers each question first will be rotated. Because there are 2 seats for council in our forum today, I will endeavor to state which seat the candidates are vying for. So let's get started. Anthony Broadman, position number 2, will be the first for opening statements. Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you very much for having me. Yes, my name is Anthony Broadman, and I'm running for Bend City Council position 2 because I love this city. I want to serve this community the same way I've served the public my whole career. As an attorney, I serve federally recognized tribal governments throughout the West, as well as businesses here in Bend. We have to plan intelligently for growth. That means a safe, connected transportation system and working meaningfully to address congestion. We have to ensure that every child in this city can get to and from school safely at a bare minimum. We have to make homes more affordable for working people, working families here in Bend, not through California-style sprawl, but through safe, connected neighborhoods. And we have to work to prevent and reduce homelessness, which went up 12% before the pandemic. The city also needs to be a good partner to small businesses and workers as we work through the COVID-19 pandemic, which is a public health crisis, but obviously also a financial one. Our kids aren't able to go back to school yet. I think that I've shown that I can work across the entire city of Bend. I've been endorsed by the Bulletin, the Chamber of Commerce PAC, the Central Oregon Labor Chapter, the Sierra Club, the Oregon League of Conservation Voters, as well as Mayor Russell and former State Senator Neil Bryant. I will bring pragmatic solutions to the problems facing us through initiatives like my child care provision at committee meetings with Councillor Campbell, through the city's adoption of my proposal to open city streets to more businesses, and through my proposal, which will go before council tomorrow, making sure that businesses along Brooks Promenade can succeed during the pandemic. I would be honored to have your support, and thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. Rita, you are next. Your seat 4, and your opening statement, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rita Schenkelberg, and my pronouns are she, her, and they, them, and I'm running for Bend City Council position 4. I began this race after hearing Bend City Council's statement connected to the murder of George Floyd. The statement meant to me that Bend City Council has a lot of learning to do around systemic racism and white supremacy here in Central Oregon. And so as I began to learn more about Bend City Council and the impact Bend City Council has on all of the basic needs that the entire community deserves to have and deserves to have living here, I got really intrigued. And so that's a little bit about why I began running. And then as I've learned more and more, really understanding the importance of bringing many different voices to the table, encouraging our Black, Indigenous, and people of color to have a voice and to really be able to voice those concerns to local government, removing the barriers to local government and making some of that information a lot more understandable. Also, as a renter here in Bend, it is incredibly important that we prioritize affordable housing, that we create access to housing for all individuals. And as someone who has struggled to find housing here as a renter, that weighs pretty heavy on my heart. Also really looking at the transportation system we have here and how incredibly important that we have connected east to west and also create safety within our bike lanes and our sidewalks. I'm very excited to announce that I've been endorsed by Governor Brown, which was very, very, very exciting, and I was extremely speechless. So I'm excited to share that with you all today, and I hope I can count on your vote for Bend City Council position 4.
Thank you, Rita. Michael, your turn for opening statement and running for seat 4.
Thank you. My name is Michael Hughes. I'm running for position 4 on the Bend City Council. I'm an attorney here in town. I'm also a farmer. I've lived in Bend since 2012, and the city has been very good to myself and my family, and now I want to give back to the city. That's why I'm running for city council, because I love this town so much and what it represents. Now, however, I was troubled recently when I saw some events take place at the Pilot Butte Park, where there was some gatherings and people ended up stealing signs and throwing punches and pepper spraying the crowd. None of these activities are protected by free speech, and they all are really violent, and I condemn that sort of violence. That's not what Bend's about. I've participated in marches and protests in Bend. I've done so with my wife and with my child, and they were always peaceful. And people should be able to assemble without there being any violence. And what I see is an intolerance of other people's opinions. And I think this is growing and growing. And this is a problem. And one of the groups that was cited by the Bend Bulletin for being involved in some of this violence was the Central Oregon Peacekeepers. And I was troubled to learn that my opponent had actually paid the Central Oregon Peacekeepers some money. I was more troubled to learn that they were employed to be security at a COAR event that we all attended. And I don't understand why we need security in Bend. I don't understand at a private event. I don't know who the Central Oregon Peacekeepers are. I don't know if they're licensed and bonded to do security work, but this is poor judgment. And this is the type of judgment we don't need at the city council as we enter this phase that we're entering. I have the experience in dealing with complex issues. I have the experience in dealing with diverse people. And more importantly, I have experience in listening to all opinions and be able to tolerate people with other opinions than I have. And that's why I'm asking for your support for the city council.
Thank you very much. Appreciate all the candidates' opening statements. We will start with the questions. Rita, you are first for the first question. How could the Bend City Council work with the police department so there is better communication and sharing of information in times of upheaval, such as when ICE came to town and protests erupted?
I think it's incredibly important that we prioritize the needs of our neighbors. Many of the humans who were there standing in front of the buses during the ICE protest were people that have lived here for a really long time, and it's incredibly important that we protect the people that already live here. As we kind of look at the conversations between Bend City Council and between Bend PD, Bend City Council oversees and can create policy for Bend PD. So making policies that protect everyone that live here. Not only is that important, but also getting a greater understanding of kind of what Bend PD's role is here. A lot of the calls that Bend PD has responded to over the last year have been mental health crisis calls. And so does Bend PD have the training to respond to those mental health crisis calls? And does Bend PD have that as a need and a skill set that they want to have for the police department? So are we prioritizing Bend PD learning about those mental health crisis reactions, and or are we able to allow other individuals who have mental health backgrounds or other types of programs to support Bend Bend PD when they're responding to those calls.
Thank you very much, Rita. Michael, position 4, you're next, please.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, the city council works hand in hand with the police department, and it's important that they do so. Obviously, the city council provides the funding that's necessary for the police department to operate. More importantly, though, the city council can help direct where that funding is used. Obviously, paying staff salaries, equipment, et cetera, is important, but training is also important. So the city council can determine what type of training, or help determine what type of training that the police get. And that is important, because training police officers is one of the most important things that can be done to make sure that the police department is efficient, and more importantly, that the police department respects the constitutional rights of the citizens. And I have a lot of experience in this. I'm a former professor of criminal law and criminal procedure. A lot of the students I taught were people who went on to law enforcement. So I understand a lot about criminal justice policies and how they play out in the real world. And I understand how the city can form some policies that can aid the police department in what they do, not only in the mental health aspect, but in some other aspects. And more importantly, the city council can help direct the hiring policies of the police department, so that the police department can look to diversify and hire more diverse employees that work within the police department.
Thank you very much, Michael. Anthony, your turn.
Thanks, Kim. I think the question was, how could
the Bend City Council work with the police department so there is better communication and sharing of information in times of upheaval, such as when ICE came to town and protests erupted?
Right. So we're talking about communication, which is critical at every level of government. And I think that the Bend Police Department did a pretty admirable job during the ICE incursion, which, let's call that what it was. It was political theater from the Trump administration to try to incite peaceful demonstration into turning into something very different. And Ben didn't take the bait. I was very proud that night of our Latinx community leaders, our clergy, our civil rights leaders, including the peacekeepers who were there. Michael, you referred to them at the outset, maintaining the peace. So I think the police department did a really effective job that night during an extremely difficult situation that was brought on entirely by an inappropriate incursion by ICE for, like I said, political theater. I would hope that we would support our policemen and our police women in events like that. Hopefully they don't happen again, but when they do, I would hope that, that our department had learned a lot from that night, learning how to deal with the Trump administration when they do this sort of inappropriate theater in our city, which doesn't need to be here.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Michael, you're the first for the second question. Inclusionary zoning, which calls for several types of housing within the same neighborhood, may be up for debate in the Bend City Council soon. Do you agree that this approach to create affordable housing?
Well, I think you can use inclusionary zoning to increase the type of developments that take place in neighborhoods, and certainly that's going to be key to being able to have some affordable housing projects. I mean, we always have to be careful, though, that just yesterday I argued before the Court of Appeals on a land use issue, and land use can become very complex, so complex that people that get involved in these land use decisions can be stuck in the Land Use Appeals Board or the Court of Appeals Board for years, including the municipalities, the cities, the counties that are involved in these decisions. So I think anytime we do anything with zoning, the city has to do so in a very cautious manner so that we don't create land use disputes that get stuck in the courts for years. But I think inclusionary zoning is an important part of trying to have some more affordable housing in Bend. But with anything, it's an economic analysis. Building anything in Bend is costly because the system development charges are costly, the permitting process is costly. And so in addition to the inclusionary zoning, we have to do some things to reduce the costs of actual development. And those are the things that I would support as a city councilor.
Thank you very much, Michael. Anthony, you're next on the question.
Thanks. I support more diverse, different types of housing in Bend. That's the only answer to building our way out of the crisis that we're in right now. And let's be clear, the crisis is that many people who work in Bend cannot afford to live here. That's not the type of city I think any of us want to live in. And we need to confront this issue using many different tools. Construction in Bend is expensive. Development in Bend is expensive because the cost of land in Bend is expensive. So the city needs to be a partner to people who are trying to rent and own here and work here by putting in place not just inclusionary zoning, but deregulating many aspects of development in Bend, making sure that developers and the people who are going to live in the homes that developers build are all put in a situation where they can succeed. So yes, part of that is inclusionary zoning, but we also need to double down on what's provided under House Bill 2001, the different types of housing that are available. We need to focus much more profoundly on the Bend Central District, which is an opportunity to build more houses on less land. Like I said, this is a problem that is really generated by the cost of land. The only thing we can do is put more houses on less land, particularly in the Central District and areas like it in the interior of our city.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Rita, same question.
I do support inclusionary housing in neighborhoods. I think it's incredibly important to meet City Council's goal of increasing housing units. We're going to have to get really creative on where we put the housing and in what way we construct it. So when we're talking about those increase in housing units, we're looking at duplexes, we're looking at triplexes and other options so that people can actually afford to live in the neighborhoods. But it can't just stop with having diverse housing units. It needs to include also having complete neighborhoods so humans can walk or bike to grab something from the store, or if they want to grab food in their neighborhood. It also means that we have to have safe transportation within those complete neighborhoods. We can't have kids trying to cross like 8th Street and everyone drives pretty fast down that road. So how do we create that safety? I think it's also incredibly important as a renter. We are in midst of a housing crisis. People don't have places to live. And the way that we can help mitigate that is by increasing the housing units and really supporting the people that already live here, already work here, and are already contributing to the economic growth here in Bend.
Thank you very much, Rita. Now for the next question. Anthony, you'll be first on this one. Do you support the library bond? Why or why not?
I don't. I was disappointed that the library put the bond on the ballot at a moment when they already knew there was a transportation bond that would be heading to the voters. Of course, that's for the whole county instead of just Bend, but I was disappointed that the bond was put in at that time. And I think that there is a better opportunity to have a more centrally located library that serves more people and doesn't put other branches basically in the mothballs. So I would like to see more investment in libraries. I use the library. We use the library every day at my house, my daughters and I, and it's very important to me to support the library, but I think the location, the reliance on a 4 football field parking lot, and the lack of vision when it comes to having a central library be part of more cohesive, connected transportation system is nearsighted. And I would like to see the city, the library board, and the rest of the community get together and talk about how the library, however we fund it, a central library in the future can be the centerpiece of a much more dynamic, elegant city civic space.
Thank you very much. Rita, same question.
I don't support the library bond. I was looking at some of the funding for the library bond, and it shows a lot of funds going to the central library that hasn't been constructed yet, and some more funds going to the downtown library, and almost no funding going to the east side library. And I think this is kind of a continued trend that we see here in Bend, and I've talked to a lot of east side Bend voters, and they're like, no one develops on this side of town. And they really feel, and you can see it in the way that the library bond is written, that there are a lot of funding pieces that don't support the east side of Bend. And the reality is the east side of Bend is very expansive, and they require more than like a strip mall library. They really need actual library space, not only an increased amount of books, but also just space. I went in there a couple days ago to do some printing, and there's almost no room in there. And so when they're trying to uphold the COVID protocols, there's not a whole lot of space to do much of anything. And so I would really urge, as you're looking at the library bond, encourage the library board to really look at how can we support the entire community here in Bend with the library structures that we already have, and in support the other Central Oregon libraries who also need support, Redmond, Sun River, and the other locations here in Central Oregon.
Thank you, Rita. Michael, same question.
Thank you. I support the libraries a great deal. But if you look at the library bond and the transportation bond, you're basically asking the voters in the middle of an economic crisis to foot some $300 million in new taxes. And so therefore I don't support the library bond in its current state, but the library is important. It should be noted that the East Side Library was kind of an experiment to see if people would use a smaller library, and they do. The East Side Library is used a lot. My family uses it. My family uses all the libraries. Frankly, compared to other places in the country, the library system here is pretty top notch, actually. And does it need improvement? Yes. I tend to agree with the editorial that was in the bulletin this weekend by one of the library board members who talked about it. And I think we do need to start moving to the future. I mean, I'm a book geek. I'm surrounded by books. I got books from the 1700s and 1800s sitting right in front of me. But the future is electronics and reading books electronically. And I think maybe the libraries need to spend some more time considering how they can increase that sort of access for the library. But ultimately, I'm opposed to the bond at this time, but I do support our libraries, and I'm a big supporter of all the libraries and what they do to the communities and for the communities.
Thank you very much, Michael. Next question will be to you, Rita, and since we're talking about bonds, do you favor the traffic flow ballot measure 9-135, and what ideas do you have for combating traffic and improving public transportation in Bend?
I do support the transportation bond, and I think that traffic flow is a huge part of why we're having so many conversations about transportation here in Bend. I think that with the influx of growth here in Bend, I think most people are surprised when they're trying to commute from the west side of Bend to the east side of Bend, and surprised on the extra 10 minutes that it takes. I know I have really felt that also. And I know that there are a lot of conversations about roads and connectivity, and I really do support creating that connectivity from the east side of Bend to the west side of Bend, and not only connecting those incomplete roads, but also really looking at how do we prioritize and make safe the sidewalks and the bike lanes. So many people here in Bend love to bike commute. So many people here in Bend have the capacity to walk to work, but a lot of the times there's incomplete sidewalks or not safe bike lanes, and we're not able to do that. Crossing from the east side of Bend and trying to go over, or rather under, Greenwood or Franklin is kind of terrifying. I was having a conversation with my roommate last night. And so how do we create safety in that? And so we can encourage people to be on their bikes or walking instead of another car on the road. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rita. Michael, same question.
Well, along the same lines as the last question, people are hurting right now. And I didn't support putting the transportation bond on the ballot this year, at least not $190 million worth of it. I understand that the taxes don't raise for 2 years, but it's hard to explain that to people when they're wondering if they're going to be able to pay their mortgage or pay their rent. And so I just think it's a bad time to put that big of a bond on. And then when you combine it with the library bond, we're just asking the people a lot. But we do hear a lot about traffic flow in this town. But if you've been to Minneapolis or Chicago or LA or Any other big cities, it still seems pretty mild. The traffic does in this town. Doesn't mean we can't improve it. We should 100% create some sort of bike pedestrian only pathway from the east to the west that connects the downtown. We need to do more to connect our bike paths along the river to make this a more bike friendly town. I think if we get more people on bikes, obviously congestion is going to go away. And I think we need to re-examine the speed limits in some areas. 35 miles an hour with the amount of traffic we have and bikes and pedestrians in some areas is just it's too fast. We need to slow down, and people in general just need to slow down. I love this town because I can drive slow without people honking at me most of the time. So I think we just need to slow down and chill out and have more access to bike availability.
Thank you very much, Michael. Anthony, same question.
Thank you. So I support the transportation bond. I have and continue to campaign to ensure that we as a community pass it. I think voters are quite intelligent and very readily appreciate the notion that these bonds aren't going to be sold for a couple of years, meaning that we're pushing back the impact of selling these bonds for at least 2 years. And let's be honest, a lot of these projects aren't even going to be groundbroken for another 8-9 years. If we kick the can on transportation again because people are concerned about today's environmental climate, I think we're going to regret it later. It will not just hamper our transportation system, but we have important climate action goals that hinge on whether or not we're going to reduce vehicle miles traveled in this city. If we make this the most bikeable, busable, walkable city, it will also be the most drivable city. It will also be the place where we are continuing to compare ourselves favorably to other cities when we look at congestion. We need to make sure that every kid in the city can get to and from school safely. We need to make sure that you can get across town using the mode of transportation that you choose. Part of that is investing right now in transportation through this transportation bond, which is less than 20% of what we're going to spend over the next 20 years on our transportation infrastructure. It's critical to pass it right now.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Next question, Michael, you'll be up for it first. As part of the city's diversity, equity, and inclusion project, the Bend City Councilors have voted to create the Human Rights and Equity Commission. What are your thoughts about this project?
Well, I think it's worthwhile, and I think it's going to help to potentially get more voices. Anytime we have a commission, we can get more voices to the table and bring more information to the council. That's important. Obviously, we're in a pretty divisive period in our history. I think anybody who looks at history understands that we're in a divisive period. And I think the more voices that we can get at the table, because what happens is, and I know about this, for 20 years, I worked to make a major social change in this country, a major social change involving the cannabis laws. And we did so without resorting to violence. We did so by bringing groups of people together, often who had very different opinions on things, to try to form a coalition. And that's what we have to do to solve problems in today's world. We don't solve problems by stealing signs and getting into fistfights with each other. We solve problems by coming to the table, understanding our differences, understanding that despite all our differences, we're more alike than we could ever imagine. And when we can do that, and this commission will hopefully do that, we'll bring more voices to the table so that the city council can understand what's going on out there, what people are troubled by with, and what we can do to solve these problems.
Thank you very much, Michael. Anthony, you're next to answer. And if any of you want me to repeat the questions, please feel free to ask.
No, thank you. I've got it. So let me just say a couple of things. One, I totally support the Human Rights and Equity Commission. It's an important first step, but we absolutely have to make sure that it's not just bringing voices to the table. It's a mechanism to provide meaningful, concrete policy changes to dismantle racism, racist systems, and make sure that the promise of this city is consistent with what we all know Bend to be, and that is an egalitarian place where everybody should have an opportunity to enjoy in the promise of this amazing place. I think that this is one step in that, but it has to be concrete. There has to be a mandate to ensure that the promise of Bend is available to everybody. I want to push back a little bit on what Mr. Hughes just said about fistfights and suggesting that there's some sort of lack of law and order. I think that's obviously a red herring and a scare tactic that's being used nationwide to try and foment fear about what is a really important moment in our country, and that's the 2020 civil rights movement, which in almost all circumstances has been peaceful and a really important moment for Black people, Indigenous people, Latinx people, Asian Americans to voice their concerns about racist systems and have us as white people support them. So I think that I'm very proud of the peaceful demonstration that we've seen in Bend. I'm proud of the community.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Rita, same question.
I am very excited about the Human Rights and Equity Commission that we have here. I think they're reading another ordinance about it. That'd be tomorrow. So it's very, very exciting. I'm really excited to have people of color be brought to the table. And just to talk a little bit more about kind of what Anthony was saying, it's really great to bring us to the table as a queer person of color, but we have been encouraged and brought and maybe listened to, I'm guessing for a while now. And the reality is that we don't need you to listen anymore. We need you to take actionable steps. How do we create action plans? How do we change a system that has oppressed people like me and other individuals just like me for hundreds of years? And by doing that is not only hearing what we say, but taking what we say and do something with that information. You know, I think that a lot of the conversations right now have been about, you know, taking the narrative and spinning it in one direction or another. But the reality is no human should ever have to be on the side of the road explaining why their life matters. And that is the problem that we're seeing right now, not only in this town, but in this country.
Thank you very much, Rita. Next question. First, Anthony, you'll be answering. The Community Climate Action Plan was voted in by the Bend City Council last year. Do you agree with the plan?
Yes, I don't think it goes far enough. This is not just important to all of us living here now. It's profoundly important to my 3 daughters that this is a place that is doing something about climate. This is an issue my kids care about. This is an issue that when I was sitting in the back of the city council, when it was up for the second reading, that I was sitting next to 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds who are working really hard on this. And when you see the look in their faces of, hold on, you're making a decision about my future and it's a close vote, or it's a 4-3 vote. How can this be? And it was so apparent this summer that we need to take this, it's too late, but we need to take this matter very seriously. We're going to have more and more smoky summers, and I reject the idea that this is too big of a problem for the city to take up, right? This is the responsibility of every level of government. And just because the federal government has failed us as a country to do enough about climate action, it doesn't take away our obligation to take care of our kids, our future, and the land, air, and water of Bend that we are so fortunate enough in this community to be stewards of.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Rita, your question?
I do support the Community Climate Action Plan. Something that, hold on one second. I'm like, all right, there we go. I think that it's really amazing that community aspect, right? Like, it wasn't just a committee that was formed by the city. There were so many different individuals that were able to kind of share their perspective on the climate right now and really have like conversations and all of these really different perspectives. I mean, I think that it's just so important that we have all of those different perspectives and that we're able to create plans together. That it's not just that we took kind of a sampling of people, but to have like over 100 voices being heard in that Community Climate Action Plan, I think is going to change the way that we kind of apply it and implement it here. And the reality is that Bend is already pretty environmentally conscious. And if we really look at this community climate action plan, we can move towards being a climate action leader here in Oregon and maybe here in the country. I mean, there's so many humans who are having conversations about electric vehicles, about decreasing carbon emissions. We are so passionate about the wildfires and having conversations about protecting our wildlife here and our wildlife here in Oregon. You know, so many people were touched and affected by the wildfires. And I think that this is something that we need to keep at the front of our foresight and really continue to have conversations about it.
Thank you very much, Rita. Michael, your question? Or I guess it's your answer.
The community action plan, I agree with it, and kind of much like the equity commission and what the other candidates said, a lot is learned by bringing people to the table. And when we talk about the climate action plan, that's great. But what I find a lot of time is with these is there's a lot of platitudes and there isn't a lot of action. I've actually fought for people's civil rights, Black people, brown people, Asian people, immigrants from all over the world. I fought for their civil rights. I've actually done these things to prevent them from being railroaded by the systems. With regard to environmentalism, I've been an environmentalist since I was a kid and collected cans at the side of the road so I could buy baseball shoes. I've been recycling since the 90s before there was recycling known to people. I was involved in a class action toxic tort case against Monsanto and Dow Chemical. I know what it is to fight for the environment. So while I agree with the action plan, I'd like to see the city do more. I'd like to see the city examine what chemicals they're using in our parks and on the side of the road, and whether or not those are contain things that might cause cancer. I think the city could do a lot more than the action plan, and I would be in favor of looking at anything that would involve making our environment cleaner.
Thank you very much, Michael. Rita, you're first on the next question. What specific ideas do you have for addressing the issue of homelessness in Bend, and how can the council help with the need for a warming shelter?
Our houseless community continues to be pushed aside. As we move into the winter months, it was even a little bit crisp as I was coming into work this morning, is that we don't have a warming shelter for them as it begins to get colder and colder. I was looking at the weather today on my phone and I'm like, oh my gosh, is that a snowflake? So all of the humans who are houseless right now, what are they gonna do this weekend if it snows? Where are they gonna go? And the answer is we don't know. We have not put the forethought. We have not done the work. We have not had the conversations to support the people who do not have somewhere to be. And that is not okay. That's inhumane. And there are so many houseless people who are their families, their kids. There are people who are trying to go to school. There are people who are holding down jobs. And just because Bend is in the middle of a housing scarcity crisis that I have felt directly, and we have not prioritized having a permanent warming shelter, not a temporary to make it through just one season, but not a permanent, is an atrocity. Why don't we have somewhere for them to be? Why can't we support the community that lives here?
Thank you very much, Rita. Michael, your turn.
Thank you. I'm going to steal an idea from another candidate who said it in a forum, and I thought it was actually a really good idea. I mean, we have to do something. We can't do nothing. It's one of the reasons I ran for mayor a couple of years ago, was to highlight the homelessness issue that we were dealing with. It's not humane to have people sleeping on your sidewalks or in the middle of the freeway. And Bend is better than that. We're way better than that. Now, the question is, how do we pay for this? Because that's with everything. I mean, it's great to have all these ideas, but the city has a limited budget. We're not Jeff Bezos. We've got limited funds that we can work with. So how do we do that? I mean, I've always thought it would take a private a cooperation with private donations in the city, but the city has land at Juniper Ridge, and I think they should think about using that land. And I think the city should consider putting up a $10 million bond and seeing if the people of the city have it in their heart to put some money together, because we're not going to get a shelter built without money. But if we could get a $10 million bond together, I think that would be plenty to get a warming shelter. If the city could donate some of the property at Juniper Ridge, I know it would be. And we have to do it. It's with everything. Talk's great, but at some time we gotta do something. And that's what I do as a lawyer. We do things. And so that's what we need to do. We need to do something about it.
Thank you very much. Anthony, your question.
Thank you. So as I said at the outset, our houseless neighbors, the number of our houseless neighbors rose by 12% before the coronavirus. I'm encouraged that everybody running for office, these volunteer public service positions at the city council level, understands that this is a generational problem, and it will affect not just our neighbors, but all of us going forward. We need to look at the issue of homelessness in two parts. One is preventing people who are living at the margins right now from slipping into homelessness. And also the people who have very recently become homeless or houseless, we're getting them into supportive arrangements, because it is much less expensive as a community to prevent somebody from slipping into homelessness before it happens or right after it happens than getting somebody out of homelessness who has been struggling with that for some period of time. I think that the Juniper Ridge idea, I agree with Mr. Hughes, we have land. We do not have a funding source for a permanent warming shelter. The first thing I would do would be to direct the city manager to direct his staff to come up with a funding plan for a permanent winter shelter. And then we need to look at transitional solutions to get people out of housing, again, using the resource that Mr. Hughes points to, and that is Juniper Ridge. So that's what I would do.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Michael, you're first up for this next question. How can you help Bend City residents to connect with the social and ecological landscape of the broader area around Bend that includes things like ranching, farming, indigenous people, water supply issues, and sagebrush and forest conditions?
I may have to ask you to repeat that. How can we help the city connect people to our natural resources, essentially? Would that break it down?
Social and ecological landscape of the broader area around Bend that includes things like ranching, farming, indigenous people, and water supply issues, those cultures.
Right, and I think that is important, because our lifeblood is the river, and this area, long before Bend was here, the lifeblood was a river. It's what drew people here to begin with. And then the natural resources in the mountains around the river. And what do we do to get people connected? You know, and I think maybe you're talking about a little bit of divide between the city folk and the people who live outside the city. And there is a little bit of difference when you get outside of Bend and get out to the country, like I do frequently as somebody who works with farmers in the area. I think that's this open dialogue. I think the most important thing you can do is be willing to listen to somebody who's different than you. Be willing to listen to somebody who totally disagrees with you and thinks something different than you. And when we do that, that's how we come together as a community. And there's so much great around us. We have so many little mini ecological systems even around Bend, but our water is important. And I hope we all can get together soon and discuss our water scarcity issue, because that's an important issue, and we all need to get together on that because we all need the water.
Thank you very much, Michael. Anthony, you're next. Would you like me to repeat this question?
Sure, thanks, Kim.
Okay. How can you help Bend City residents to connect with the social and ecological landscape of the broader area around Bend that includes things like ranching, farming, indigenous people, water supply issues, the sagebrush and forest conditions, or that culture?
Great, thank you. Let me take it in three parts, and I'll try to be quick. In terms of accessing our natural resources surrounding Bend, I think we need to do a better job with transportation. That may sound a little bit boring, but I would love to see the city partner with COIC to make it less requisite, make it easier to use the natural resources surrounding Bend without a car. So more frequent types of shuttles and buses and other opportunities for mass public transit that leave our city and that reduce our reliance on cars. In terms of being a better partner intergovernmentally to our tribal neighbors to the north, I think the city hasn't done nearly enough to coordinate with the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs on issues of mutual concern, including the health of the river, which we share, including the health of our forests, which are ceded lands of the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs, and present an opportunity to work intergovernmentally with people throughout the region. And then finally, I think that to sort of piggyback on what Mr. Hughes said, we are surrounded by really important ranching and agricultural resources. And I think we can extend and build on the relationship that we have through where we get our food to really focus on making sure that we are a part of the agricultural and food culture of Central Oregon, not just at farmers market, but throughout the week.
Thank you very much. Rita, same question. Would you like me to repeat it?
No, I think I got it. There's just many different aspects of the question. When I was listening to your question, the first thing that came up for me is I grew up in a city, and so the access to be able to like talk to local farmers and like talk to people who grow your food was something that I had never experienced until I lived in Bend. And then being able to kind of like walk around the farmers market or be able to just go to Locavore and be able to like buy food that was grown here was like the first time I'd ever experienced that, and it was so amazing, and it changed my entire relationship with the land that we live in, to be able to actually eat food that was grown here and be able to learn about the food that's grown here and be able to learn about the climate. I think that's why it's so important that we continue to talk about the Community Climate Action Plan, because it's really going to protect our surrounding areas. To talk about the Indigenous people that were here before we took their land and that are still here now, it's incredibly important that we support in any way we can for them to live sustainably where they live. And then if they'd like to come and live in Bend, if they get called to want to live here. You know, the reservation was on a boil notice last week, and they couldn't use any of the water inside of their homes, and that should be a concern not only just in the reservation but also here in Bend.
Thank you very much, Rita. Anthony, you'll be first for this question. Do you think that campaign contributions should be limited, and do you have campaign restrictions that you voluntarily apply to your own campaign?
I would prefer that these campaigns be limited to zero. I think that opportunities like today, where we get to share our ideas, are the most valuable things for voters to hear. And if it were possible to run a campaign, given Supreme Court precedent about free speech involving campaign finance, that's the system that we should employ. And it's the one that gets, I think, the leaders who reflect the voters most effectively. I don't have any limitations. I've raised as many resources as I possibly can from over 200 individual donors, from groups as diverse as the Realtors on one hand, to the Chamber of Commerce, to Sierra Club, to Oregon League of Conservation Voters, to the Deschutes Democrat Party. I'm really proud of the broad framework of support that I've received in just getting these ideas out, because what I love about campaigning and don't love about campaign finance is that this is really an opportunity to hear what is important to Bend. And that's how I look at campaigning. The finance part of it, to me, is an afterthought.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Rita, same question.
I think that this is such an interesting question, because as someone who hasn't ran for elected public office before, I didn't really know a whole lot about campaign finance, and that actually each state has different campaign finance kind of parameters. So all of that has been incredibly surprising and eye-opening. And I do think that there should be limits. I think that I've been in shock, honestly, the amount of money, whether it's in kind or actual cash, that gets donated to some of the other people who are running in Bend City Council race. I mean, the city of Bend is big, but it's not that big. And some of the numbers that are being donated to Bend City Council races is kind of crazy to me. And just I've honestly just mostly been in shock. I have been really excited from a lot of the people who I have received money from. I definitely take pride in saying that I have a people-powered campaign. I've had also over like 200 donations, 200 different donors, and donations as small as $5, and getting really excited to get those $5 because I didn't know who that person was. And having someone believe in me. And it's been really important to me to be a little bit more choosy about who I take money from and who I don't take money from. And it's really felt good. And I feel full of integrity of the way that I've run my campaign and my campaign finances.
Thank you very much, Rita. Michael, same question.
Thank you. Well, when I ran for mayor, I didn't raise any money, and then I was told that I'd have to raise some money for the city council race, and so we did that. And I've been very honored to have the COAR provide me some support. I've been happy to have the Ben Chamber PAC provide me some support. I think political action committees are important. They help people with common interest to pool their money and try to effectuate change that way. I believe in free speech. I believe people should be able to contribute to who they want to contribute. So in that regard, I mean, I'm trying to run a campaign for as cheap as I can because, I mean, it's a non-paid position, it's a public service position, in my opinion. So the fact that we're seeing this kind of money poured into a local campaign is a little bit eye-opening. Voluntary restrictions, I mean, I'm a nonpartisan, so I haven't really sought out the endorsement of either the political parties, nor would I, since it's a nonpartisan campaign and position. Other than that, I mean, my limitations are I don't want to spend a bunch of money for a non-paid position that I'm doing for public service. So that's my limitation, is to try to spend as little money as possible to make sure we get the message out.
Thank you very much, Michael. Rita, this will be our last question for all of the candidates, and then we'll go on to final. So Rita, you get the first crack at the last question. The League of Women Voters and City Club feel very strongly about civil discourse. What do you think can be done to reverse the polarization happening in politics?
I realize now that you might be hearing some landscaping happening in the background, so I apologize for that in this current moment, the excitement of doing Zoom forums. I think that it's incredibly important that we have conversations and create action plans that support the entire community. And so that means that everyone has a place to kind of be heard, and that we really address the structure. So when we talk about white supremacy, when we talk about systemic racism, those are things that oppress everyone. They don't just oppress me as a queer person of color, they also oppress the white people who are within those systems. And so we need to address it so that everyone can benefit. If people aren't being racist towards me, then they will not be racist or make decisions against other people also. And that will not only help the system that we all live in, but it will also help this system that puts a lot of people in disadvantaged places. So as I say that, I understand that the question was not about polarization. And I think that we should be having pretty heavy conversations about systemic racism. And we should really continue to dismantle those pieces that are really oppressing everyone that lives within it, and to show that health and wellness can be brought to the entire community. And with that is hard conversations and breaking down things that don't serve anyone here.
Thank you very much, Rita. Michael, you're next on this question.
Thank you. I grew up in a household that was pretty split politically. So the dinner table, we would have Democrats and we'd have Republicans, and we'd have good old fashioned debates at the table. And it was not uncommon that this would happen, or it was not uncommon that a neighbor would stop by and you'd talk about things and you might disagree with things, but it never rose to the level that we see today, to where people are just, there's so much animosity towards people. If somebody votes for somebody, oh, I hate them, I don't want to ever talk to them again. Or if somebody doesn't vote for somebody. it's terrible. It really is. It's something that we all need to work on. I suggest go out to dinner with somebody who totally disagrees with you on something and just talk about things. I mean, we need to be able to just talk to each other without getting so worked up about things. I mean, because for all our differences, at the end of the day, we're human beings, and that makes us much more alike than different. And I think it's important that we have leaders that are independent and that don't get bogged down in some of these partisan bickering that goes on. We need to have people that are above that say, hey, we've got important issues to deal with, and I can respect your opinion. I want to hear your opinion, even if I disagree with it. We have to have leaders that are willing to rise above these things and realize that what's good for the community is the most important thing.
Thank you very much, Michael. Anthony, same question.
Thanks, Kim. I think that courtesy is probably the #1 priority when it comes to talking to other people about public service and policy. I was really pleased that until today, we hadn't had any negative campaigning or discussion in either of the campaigns for these 2 seats, seat 2 or seat 4. So I think that that's what I would like to see. I will treat everybody with respect. I know I'm not always right, and I think that if you come to public service from a position of humility and service, that hopefully you get to the right place. I call on one of my flawed, but still one of my heroes nonetheless, Winston Churchill, who sat down with people who he didn't agree with fortnightly in the other club. They were people from across the aisle. And I think that if we can restore some of that type of civility to the Bend civic discourse, it will be really valuable. I'm sort of heartbroken over what I see in the House District 54 race, I think false attacks from Representative Helt, which have really changed public discourse in our city. Everybody's bringing them up to me, even though I have nothing to do with that race. I would like to see us in Bend get back to the kind of Bend egalitarianism that I know we all really value, and that is that people across the aisle can work together to make and continue to ensure Bend is an exceptional place.
Thank you so much, Anthony, and thank you to all the candidates for answering all the questions. You guys did a great job. We're now going to move into final statements. You'll have 2 minutes, and Michael, you will be first on your final statement. Thank you.
Well, thank you to the League of Women's Voters for putting on this forum. Thank you to all the candidates who show up for these things and give their time and energy and provide answers so that we can all listen to each other and figure out what we can do to make Bend better in the future. And that's really what my campaign's about. It's about making sure we have the leadership at the city council level to ensure that when we deal with all the problems that we're going to be dealing with, growth, transportation issues, diversity issues, environmental issues, all the issues that we face as a community, that we have leadership there that's going to be focused on those issues, that's going to have the type of experience that's brought to the table to help us deal with these issues. And I do believe I provide that type of experience as an attorney, and basically a general practitioner who's practiced criminal law, who's practiced business law, who's practiced land use law. I bring a lot of my legal experiences are going to come into play with all the issues that the city deals with. I mean, land use alone, everything we deal with involves land use, basically, whether it's transportation or building or development or our urban growth boundaries or getting our urban growth reserve. It's all land use issues. So these are all things that I provide a tremendous amount of experience in. I'm also the type of person who can actually sit down and discuss things with people who I may disagree with. And I had to do that, and that's how we got the cannabis laws reformed. We didn't get the cannabis laws reformed just by people who used cannabis. We got the cannabis laws reformed by a wide coalition of people who understood that these laws were wrong, that they were discriminatory, that they had a systemic racism impact, and that they needed to be changed. And it took us a long time to change it, but we did so with a coalition. And that's what I do, is I'm able to bring coalitions together so that we can solve complex problems.
Thank you very much, Michael. Rita, your final statement, please.
Thanks, Kim, and thanks to the League of Women Voters. As I'm sitting here in this forum now, I'm recognizing how much I've learned in the last couple of months. So it was a really nice way to kind of cap at the end of our campaigns that we've been running so fiercely for the last couple of months. Thank you to the candidates for being here. And honestly, thank you to the voters. I wouldn't have done it without you. You all have believed in me and taught me so much. Learning so much about policy and learning so much about how the city is run has not only inspired me to want to run for the seat and run for this seat and run this campaign to the best of my ability, but also inspired many people who are similar to my age to also get very involved in local government. And I think that that has been one of the greatest gifts of this campaign, is getting a lot of people excited about local government and understanding that local government officials are within arm's length. We want to have conversations with the people. We want to connect with the people. We want to have all of those conversations. We want to sit down. We want to have Bend City Council meetings where public comment is there and you all are heard. And I'm so excited to break down those barriers and create accessibility for the entire community that lives here in Bend. I am so grateful for all of the people who have taken a chance on me and watched me learn and grow within this. And it's just honestly, not only do I feel inspired by myself, but also inspired by all of the people that I've gotten to learn from. So thank you all. Thank you for this amazing experience. And thank you for continuing to take chances on me. And I'm excited to create affordable housing, build a stronger community, and create a better transportation system for everyone that lives here. Vote Rita Schenkelberg.
Thank you very much, Rita. Anthony, your time for your 2-minute closing.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you to both organizations, and thank you to Michael and Rita for doing this. I'm honored to be a part of this with you. My first week as a lawyer, I keep thinking back to this. I just turned 42, and I think I was 29, and I didn't have any gray hair, and I didn't know anything about really practicing the law, because they don't teach you that in law school, as you know, Michael. A tribal leader and elected at that time told me, don't ever tell me what I can't do. Tell me what I can do. And I want to be that type of a public servant. I think we can have a safe, connected transportation system. I think we can meaningfully prevent homelessness before it starts. I think we can ensure that working families in Bend can afford to stay here, can afford to rent here, can afford to own a home here. I think we can make sure that the Bend Central District is a jewel of our city over the next generations. I think we can ensure that we make this a great place to grow a business, grow a family, and still honor the Deschutes River, still honor this land over which we are so fortunate to be stewards of. I think we can make sure that this is the most bikeable, walkable, and yes, busable city in Oregon. There is no reason to think that we can't do that. I believe in the spirit of Bend. I believe that these solutions are going to come from Bend, not from Portland, not from California or anywhere else. Again, my name is Anthony Broadman. I would be really honored to have your support. If you haven't already voted for me, please take your ballot out. Please make decisions based on your values. And again, thank you to everybody for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Anthony. I want to thank all of the candidates today. Michael Hughes, running for position 4, Rita Schenkelberg, running also for position 4, and Anthony Broadman, running for position 2. Thank you for participating in today's forum. You guys did great, thanks. And thanks to City Club of Central Oregon and the League of Women Voters for partnering together to get this information out. Remember, if you enjoyed today's forum and would like to help cover the cost, please consider making a donation to City Club on their website at cityclubco.org. If you are interested in becoming a member of the League of Women Voters of Deschutes County, or making a contribution, please contact the League through their website at lwvdeschutes.org. Thanks again to our Candidates Forum Series sponsors, the Deschutes Public Library and Buchanan Schmidt LLC. The next candidate forum will be Bend City Council candidates, positions 1 and 3, and will air on Thursday, October 22nd at 7 p.m. Please be sure to watch. Thank you for your interest in getting your ballots in and keeping democracy alive. This was pre-recorded Thursday, October 20th, 2020. Thank you for joining us.